Good morning, everyone. Our presentation for today is about sociocultural factors. It will be presented to you by Asma Askawi, Amal Bqali, and me. So in this context, we are going to tackle the following main points, namely culture, definitions and theories, stereotypes or generalizations, attitudes, second culture acquisition, social distance, teaching intercultural competence, language policy and politics, language, thought, and culture. So, in the scope of sociocultural factors, the first question that is worth to be asked is, what does culture stand for? And as an answer to this question, we may say that culture is a way of life. It is the context within which we exist, think, feel, and relate to others. What's more, it is the glue that binds a group of people together. In this regard, Larson and Smalley described culture as a blueprint. A blueprint here means something which intend to guide us towards something else, okay? So Larson and Smalley described culture as a blueprint that guides the behavior of people in a community and is incubated in family life. It governs our behavior in groups, makes us sensitive to matters of status, and help us know what others expect of us and what will happen if we do not live up to their expectations. Culture also helps us to know how far we can go as individuals and what our responsibility is to the group. So culture also can be defined as a set of ideas, attitudes, skills, norms, and so forth that characterize a group of people in a given period of time. And it's actually those attitudes, ideas, and so forth which guides our behavior within a particular community. So according to Matsumoto 2000, culture constitutes a dynamic system of rules, explicit and implicit, established by groups in order to ensure their survival, involving attitudes, values, beliefs, norms, and behaviors shared by a group, but harbored differently by its specific unit within the group, communicated across generations, relatively stable, but with the potential to change across time. And I think this is something which we have already explained. And please, if there is something not understood, feel free to ask, okay? So the fact that no society exists without a culture reflects the need for culture to fulfill certain biological and psychological needs in people. So when it comes to the general relationship which might exist between the acquisition of a second language and the acquisition of a second culture, we may say that the acquisition of a second language implies or is also the acquisition of a second culture, okay? So now let's move to stereotypes or generalizations, which actually refers to a conventional belief or idea which is usually false, okay? So within this spirit, we can say that in the bias of our own culture-bound worldview, we too often picture other cultures in an oversimplified manner, lumping cultural differences into exaggerated categories, and then view any person in a culture as possessing stereotypical traits. And this is what we actually have in our Moroccan culture, for instance. We usually tend to call a person, for example, from the Amazigh culture, a mean person. And we usually tend to make jokes about them. For example, واحد شيح قزاز, and so on, okay? So these are common stereotypes within our Moroccan culture. So other stereotypes may include Americans are all rich, informal, materialistic, overly friendly, and drink coffee. And when it comes to Italians, we may say that they are passionate, demonstrative, great lovers, and drink red wine. Germans are stubborn, industrious, methodical, and drink beer. The British are stuffy, polite, thrifty, and drink tea. And finally, Japanese are reserved and emotional, think a lot of pictures, and also drink tea. What about Moroccan's people? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So the stereotype may be accurate in depicting the typical member of a culture, but it is inaccurate for describing a particular individual simply because every person is unique and all of a person's behavioral characteristics cannot be accurately predicted on the basis of an overgeneralized median point along a continuum of culture norms. Is it clear? So stereotypes actually have a way of potentially devaluing people from other cultures. So to judge a single member of a culture by overall traits of the culture is really something negative. Okay? While stereotyping or generalizing people from other culture should be avoided, cross-cultural research has shown that there are indeed characteristics of culture that make one culture different from another. For example, Condon concluded from cross-cultural research that American, French, and Hispanic worldviews are quite different, especially when it comes to the concepts of time and space. Americans tend to be dominated by a psychomotor view of time and space that is dynamic, diffuse, and nominalistic. French orientation is more cognitive, with a static, centralized, and universalistic view. And when it comes to the Hispanic orientation, we may say that it is more affectively centered with a passive, relational, and intuitive worldview. So stereotypes or generalizations actually should be avoided. But when it comes to our investigations of cultures, we find out that each culture has its own specific characteristics which make it different from other cultures. So when it comes to implications within the classroom, we may say that the role of the teacher here is to make those cultural differences understood by the students. So language classroom can celebrate cultural differences and even engage in a critical analysis of the use and origin of stereotypes. And as teachers and researchers, we must strive to understand the identities of our learners in terms of their sociocultural background. This is the implications within the classroom environment. So now let's move to another concept, that of attitudes. And as a comparison between attitudes and stereotypes, we may say that stereotyping usually implies some type of attitude toward the culture or language in question. In addition, attitudes, like all aspects of the development of cognition and affect in human beings, develop early in childhood and are the results of parents' and peers' attitudes, of contact with people who are different in any number of ways, and of interacting affective factors in the human experience.
So there are no questions, but you can elaborate.
Yeah.
On what you are saying, not just to be.
So here we can say that attitudes play a part of one's conceptions of self, of others, and also of the culture in which one is living. So it seems that second language learners benefit from positive attitudes, and that negative attitudes may lead to decreased motivation, and in all likelihood because of decreased input and interaction to unsuccessful attainment of proficiency. So we have here negative attitudes versus positive attitudes and their impact when it comes to the process of learning in general. So the teacher here needs to be aware that everyone has both positive and negative attitudes. The negative attitudes can be changed, often by exposure to reality, for example, by encounters with actual persons from other cultures. Another important thing concerning negative attitudes is that they usually emerge from one's indirect exposure to a culture or group through television, movies, news, media, books, and other sources. And these sources actually are less reliable, okay? And when it comes to the role of the teacher, we can say that the teacher should replace those negative attitudes, yes, with an accurate understanding of other cultures. The last point in my part is second culture acquisition. And there are actually 4 successive stages of culture acquisition. The first stage is a period of excitement over the newness of the surrounding, which means at the beginning we are so excited with everything new in the new community. And the second stage represents what we call culture shock, which is a sense of confusion or uncertainty with feeling of anxiety. And these feelings actually are expressed by people who are exposed to an alien culture or environment. The third stage is one of gradual recovery, and general progress is made slowly but surely as individuals begin to accept the differences in thinking and feeling that surround them. What's more, they slowly become more empathetic with other persons in the new culture or in the second culture. The last stage represents near or full recovery, and this full recovery is manifested in self-confidence in the new person that has developed in this culture, adaptation, and also acceptance of the second culture. And that's it concerning my part.